Hola y buenos días. Yo soy el Señor Morris. ¿Cómo están ustedes? Today, we're going to go over the calendar and the vocabulary from our last class, and then start looking at some musical instruments and conduct an experiment with sound. Pero, primero vamos a cantar nuestra canción de saludos. Canten conmigo. Hola, buenos días. ¿Cómo están ustedes? ¿Cómo se sienten? Yo me siento bien. Muy bien. Well, I tell you what, let's go ahead and start by looking at the calendar and going over some of the questions that we always ask about this here. Okay? For example, I always ask you, ¿cuál es la fecha de hoy? Repitan todos. ¿Cuál es la fecha de hoy? And remember that when you answer this question, you'll use this form. You'll say, hoy es, and then you'll say the day of the week. And then you'll say, hoy es the day of the week, and then over here you'll say the number. 2, 3, 4. And then day of, and then the month. So, hoy es day, date, de, month. Go ahead and figure that out right now for the date that it is while you're watching this lesson. Okay, you can put me on pause and figure that one out. Another question that you need to know the answer to be able to tell me the date is the answer to this question: ¿Cuáles son los días de la semana? ¿Cuáles son los días de la semana? And now we've gone over this a couple of times, and we even have a song to help you go over the days of the week in Spanish. It goes like this: Canten conmigo. Hay 7 días en una semana, los vamos a nombrar. Help me out here, guys. Lunes, martes, miércoles, jueves, viernes, sábado, domingo. Very good. That's very good. Now, I'd like for you to go over the date every day in Spanish, okay? It's a good way to continue using your Spanish, which is, after all, the best way to learn it well. Well, last class, we started to look at some vocabulary related to music. Now, you should have those in your notebook. Let's review those right now. The first one was just the general term for music that we're studying. Do you remember how to say music in Spanish? Raise your hand and tell your teacher. And I'm going to tell you the answer when I count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Música. Música. That's right. Okay, when people all get together and lift up their voices in song, they sing. How do you say sing in Spanish? Remember? Tell your teacher. 1, 2, 3. Cantar. Cantar. Okay, and if you don't have these in your notebooks yet, you might want to get them in there. What about this? Okay, it's got the words and it's got the letters, the notes and everything. It's a song. How do you say song in Spanish? I'll give you a hint. It starts off with the same letters as to sing. Do you remember this? 1, 2, 3. Canción. And you hear the stressing of that O. Canción. Yeah. Another word that we talked about last time was what this young lady's doing with the guitar. Play. To play is what? 1, 2, 3. Tocar. Tocar. That's right. Okay. Tocar is to play. And then we talked about this. What is this called? It's almost a cognate. Note in English. En español, 1, 2, 3. Nota. Es una nota. Okay. Now you should have had all of those words in your vocabulary in your notebooks already. Now, when we talk about things, sometimes it's easier for us to arrange them into groups to help us understand them. For example, when we talk about animals and we put them into groups based on their characteristics, such as mammals have fur on the outside, fish have scales and live in water, birds have wings. Okay? That helps us group them or categorize them. We do the same thing with musical instruments based on how they make their sound. Okay? How they make their sound. Now there are 4 classes of musical instruments. This first group makes its sound by vibrating a string. Okay? String in Spanish is cuerda. Cuerda. So this group is called instrumentos de cuerda. And instrumentos, that's a cognate. You'll want to get these down in your notebooks, by the way. Instrumentos is a cognate. Instruments. De and cuerda, as I told you, means string. Instrumentos de cuerda, these are string instruments such as this guitar here or the violin here. Do you know what this one is? It's a harp, and this is a big guitar. Okay? Instrumentos de cuerda. This next group makes its noise by being struck. Okay? That's right. You hit on all of these things to make noise, don't you? In English, these are called percussion instruments, okay, such as drums and things like that. In Spanish, these are called los instrumentos de percusión. Instrumentos de percusión. Right, percussion instruments. Go ahead and get that into your notebooks. Next, we come to a class of instruments that produce sound by having wind forced through them. Okay. Flutes and trumpets and things like this would be examples of this group that has wind go through it. Now, wind in Spanish is viento, so these instruments are called los instrumentos de viento, or wind instruments. Go ahead and write that down. Instrumentos de viento. Wind instruments. Now, the final group of instruments have a keyboard. Okay? They all have keys that you play. Now, some of them have strings inside of them, like the piano or the clavichord or harpsichord. And some of them have pipes the wind goes through, like this organ. But for our purposes, we're going to say that if you play an instrument using a keyboard, we'll refer to them as los instrumentos de teclado. And teclado means keyboard. Teclado. Go ahead and get that down in your notebooks. Now, we'll begin our examination of instruments with the instrumentos de cuerda. Okay, the instrumentos de cuerda. And these are the stringed instruments. Now, although there are many examples of stringed instruments, I'll only show you a few, okay, some of the basics. The first one that I want to show you is this one. Okay? This is called la guitarra. La guitarra. And that's pretty much a cognate. This is what I play, the guitarra. Go ahead and write that down in your notebooks. The guitarra. And that's a normal-sized guitar like the one that I play. There are some that are smaller, and there are even some that are bigger, like this one. This is called el guitarrón. El guitarrón. And you can see, if you compare this to the guitarra, that this is a lot bigger. It has kind of a rounded bottom. And guitarrón, you remember how when we put ito or ita onto the end of something, it means small. When we put on onto the end of it, that means something big. So we could say a guitarrita is a little guitar, but a guitarrón is the big guitar. So go ahead and get that into your notebooks. Another instrument, otro instrumento de cuerda, es este, el violín. Y tiene aquí acento sobre la I, violín. El violín también tiene cuerdas. Tiene cuerdas, es un instrumento de cuerda. And it's a cognate, es un cognado. Entonces, es muy fácil. It's very easy to tell what this is in English. El violín. The last one that we have here is el arpa. El arpa. El arpa, and you can write that down. Now again, el arpa. What happens is if a word starts with the A, we don't call it la. So that's why we call this el arpa. Go ahead and get that written down into your notebooks. Okay? And we're going to talk about other instruments, but those are the stringed instruments that I'd like you to be able to recognize, okay? Now, we had a very talented and special visitor come into our classroom once to show us some of the instrumentos de cuerda. Okay? She's very good at many of them. She brought them to show us. Her name is Laurel Strong. Laurel Strong. Well, let's see what she had to say to us. Les presento a Laurel Strong. Laurel.
Buenos días.
Buenos días. Laurel works here at NAU with us, and she's a very accomplished guitarist. So she's going to come in and show us a few things. Laurel, I was wondering if you could explain a little bit about how string instruments work to produce their sound, and maybe play a little something for us.
Okay. First I'll show you the harp. Now this is a folk harp, so it's a little smaller than what you might see with symphony instruments. And to bring this down here. And a couple features of the harp. You'll see the strings. There's shorter strings and longer strings, and that affects the sound. The short strings are higher pitched, and the long strings are lower pitched. They're also thicker, with the smaller strings being thin. A couple other little things that affect the sound. This is to use to tighten and loosen the tuning pins. And you can hear, there's the regular sound. And I'm loosening it. It went down in pitch. Now it's going to go up. So you can hear a couple different things, the length, the thickness, and how tight or how loose the string is. Another little trick with the harp, over on the other side, we've got these little levers that raise or lower the pitch. And it doesn't do quite as much as I just did with the tuner, but here's the regular sound. You can hear it went up a little bit. So that's how it works. It's got a sound box on the back with holes, and that amplifies the sound. So when you do something like this, you get the sound, and this whole part vibrates. So that's how the harp works. Now we'll go to the guitar. And you can see there's some of the same basic ideas. This has got a sound box too. It's got tuning pins on it, pegs, but the strings are the same length. The lower strings are thick, and the higher strings are thin. And you can raise and lower the pitch, just like on the harp. The trick with the guitar is you've got frets, so that the higher up on the frets you go, the higher the sound. You can take low pitch and get a high pitch out of it. So it's some of the same basic principles as working off strings vibrating and amplified through the sound box. And the violin, the guitarone have the same sort of a setup. A little different than the harp. Okay, and do a little tune. This is a Spanish folk tune for the classical guitar.
Thank you, Laurel. That
You're
was
welcome.
really great. We appreciate your coming in. Ahora. Wow, that was really great. And it was interesting seeing all of those instruments that she had and listening to what she was saying about how the different sounds are produced. Now, to demonstrate what Ms. Strong was just telling us about the stringed instruments, I'd like to show you a quick experiment. Okay? What I'd like you to do is to get several rubber bands of different thicknesses. Okay, you can see I've got some that are pretty thick here. This one's a little bit thinner. This one's even thinner than that. Some of them are short, like this one. Some of them are real long. Oh, and if you put them just right, you can make a happy face. Okay. But I'd like you to go ahead and get some different rubber bands, okay? And then take them and stretch them out, okay? And then pluck them to get a sound. Can you hear the way that that changes as I loosen and pull it tighter? Okay. Now this was kind of a short, thick one. I'm going to try one that's a little bit longer and a little bit thinner. What do you think will happen to the sound on this one? Will it sound lower or higher? Let's find out. Yeah. Is that what you thought would happen? Well, get several different rubber bands with several thicknesses and stretch them out to various lengths to see if you can make some observations on what you hear. Okay? Now, when you get the rubber bands, don't shoot anybody with the rubber bands. Don't shoot anything with the rubber bands, or you might lose your privileges to participate in the experiment. But check it out. See if you can learn something about stringed instruments by using rubber bands. Ahora, vamos a repasar con la hoja de actividades llamada Los instrumentos de cuerda. Here we go. Los instrumentos de cuerda. Voy a escribir mi nombre. R-O-V-E-R-T-O. Okay. Write the name of the instrument under the corresponding picture. Okay. Now here are the pictures, and we've written the names right here in the key. I'd like to point out that this guitar is a little bit bigger and it has the rounded bottom. This guitar is smaller with the squared off bottom. Okay, so this is the big guitar. This is the regular size guitar. Now down at the bottom it says, find and circle the vocabulary from this lesson and the last lesson. Hint, there are 9 words in all. Oh, wait a second. I see one already. Música. So I've given you one now. And you go ahead and see if you can find the other 8 vocabulary words that we've talked about in the last 2 lessons. Now, next class, we'll continue our examination of instruments with a look at los instrumentos de percusión. Now, we'll have another visitor with us who has some really cool things, so be sure to be here. Pero saben que ya es hora de despedirnos. For our goodbye song today, I'd like to sing La Cucaracha, and rather than playing it on a rubber band, I'm going to get my guitarra. Ahora, canten conmigo. Todas las muchachas tienen en los ojos 2 estrellas, pero las mexicanitas de seguro son más bellas. La cucaracha, ya no quiere caminar, porque no tiene, porque le falta dinero para gastar. Muy bien, until we see each other next class, adiós y hasta luego.